Hello, this is David Lorimer here. I'd like to talk today a little bit about endings and beginnings, death and rebirth, the cycles of life. And I'm going to quote from this book here, which is one of my favorite books. It's called Goethe and the Power of Rhythm, a biographical essay by John Barnes. And Goethe was someone who was very aware of this rhythm of life, of death and rebirth. He even wrote that if one didn't understand this process of death and rebirth, then one was just a dismal guest on the dark earth, a quote that my old friend and mentor Sir George Trevelyan often used to use. So we ourselves, in the course of our own lives, we find ourselves at turning points, at endings and beginnings, and very often an ending is a new beginning. And so you'll be able to relate this to your own experience. But of course, this is also happening in nature as a whole. In the northern hemisphere here, we've had a wonderful spring day in France, southwest France, and everything is coming out. The daffodils are out, the primroses are out, and this is part of the whole cycle of life, which is talked about in this book. And there's a rhythm here, though. After a period of growth and expansion, all life reaches a turning point at which a new phase of withdrawal or contraction sets in. So this is the process of expansion and contraction. Then, however, with the new expansion, new life becomes possible. All life is a breathing, a going out and a coming back in. Each new breath is a new beginning, and you'll be breathing, of course, as you're listening to this. And then he talks about the all-encompassing rhythm in the breathing of the earth through the cycle of the year. In spring, we experience an outpouring of life in the growth and unfolding of plants and the activity of insects and birds. And tomorrow is the new moon, and the day after is the spring equinox. So this is very much relevant to this time of year. By midsummer, the earth has breathed out fully, and we feel her power unleashed in the rumbling thunderstorms above us. But now the earth inhales and life pulls in again. Life goes down into the roots with the cold autumn winds. By midwinter, life was withdrawn into the depths, concentrated itself in bud and seed. Without the death of winter, however, there could be no rebirth in spring. And Goethe, in this respect, he talked about death as nature's device of creating more life. And so, summing this up, John Barnes writes, death and new life, sleeping and waking, contraction and expansion in their endless manifestations can be seen as polarities between which the healthy, breathing, rhythmical movement of life takes place, ever renewing itself, ever evolving. Let me just give the example of what happens in the cycle of an apple tree. Because if you look inside an apple, you'll find, if you cut it crossways, you'll find it's a five-pointed star. But inside the apple is the seed, which is the contracted life of the apple. And in the spring, everything unfolds. The buds unfold, the flowers unfold. And then in the autumn, everything contracts again. So you can see the spring movement of the blossom and the fruiting and the fruit as the expansion phase. And then the contraction is represented in the seed, but the seed is there as a symbol of new life. And so from this seed, how many apple trees do you think can come from one seed? We don't know. So we know how many seeds are in the apple, but we don't know how many apples are in the seed. And so we can never be quite sure of what's going to unfold in our lives. So endings and beginnings, new birth, and thank you very much for listening.